So we are streaming. I'll go live.
Don't forget to go on Twitch
Yeah, go to Twitch.
under War Dance Productions. And this is being brought to you by the Carrizo Come Crudo Tribe of Texas.
There you go.
And we're going to be just sitting here, me and my cuz.
Hello,
Talking
Jesse Mancias.
Jesse Mancias. He's a Mancias with a Z.
Yes, sir.
And we always talk about that. But we're gonna sit here and just have some conversation. We were talking about a lot of stuff today, and we talk about growing up, trying to define, how we grew up and where we grew up. We grew up in the town of Plainview, Texas, and now there's a road down there out in the middle of nowhere. It's still, they don't take care of it real good, but it's named after our grandfather. I always get under it and it says Calle de Juan Mancias, but and I tell people that it's named after me. But it's actually named after my grandfather, who...
You were appropriating the dirt road.
Yeah, I was appropriating the dirt road. There you go. We were... We've got, hopefully once we break the ice here after a couple of streamings, we can really start talking about some of the stories that we heard growing up, some of the things that define who we are, and how we can go to looking at this whole thing, the metaverse, for one thing. If you're interested in that, my mind today just got blown about owning lots on the
Virtual lots.
Virtual lots, yeah.
So wait, stop. You can buy virtual lots in the metaverse now.
Yeah, my mind was blown. I can go down there and buy actually where the dummy is. What's his name? Elon Musk.
Oh.
Has put his pads on.
Which dummy?
Elon Musk, next decade. Anyway, and go right there and buy the lot and put a village around how we used to live. Put a village around how we used to live. Virtual photography of some of our and like our grandfather being on a horse riding around. Grandfather being around those rockets.
We can design that. What we put into the
how we
lot,
want it,
how we build it. We can make it an old village, how our people used to live, or whatever we want to do with it. But the interesting thing is, I think, is that they're being sold with the idea of using that for information collection. And this is an opportunity for us.
Yeah, just to take advantage of the language and also some of the rites and some of the dances that we have. I'm still kind of concerned about how we would do a bear dance virtually. But because you can do this out there showing that we're still following our traditions, although we're not, actually in the land itself, but we're still there in a sense. It's like a spiritual owning of the land, that the spirits are still there doing birthing rites and doing, things that bring us to a more practical understanding of the life ways. It's not, they use the word culture a lot, but I think we go beyond that. Now to that point of understanding that we have the land that gives us meaning, and in understanding that, I think
we've always said that, though. I mean, I've always heard you say that specifically about the difference between culture and life ways. Like there's an anthropological distinction there, right? Like it has to do with like anthropology. Like there's a difference between culture and there's like we tend to think we tend to name things as culture in modern society that aren't necessarily it's not necessarily culture, it's more like lifestyles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus lifeways, like and those are like ways of survival, but they're acculturated through a people's connection to like specific land, language, so on and so forth, right? But yeah, we tend to throw that culture word everywhere. Like, the metaverse is its own culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the problems, because a lot of times everything's, and that was one of the things I was kind of talking about earlier, because of when we talk about buying land, in a sense, you still have to buy a lot on the metaverse, and you're still having to follow that colonial thought of capitalism to be able to survive. And that's what we've had to do over the years to try and make a big difference to to bring a reality of that we're still here. We haven't gone anywhere, and we're not. And that's exactly what the reading on from the archives from the Railroad Commission says about, when our relative talks about coming back with the scalps, and throws them out on the floor. He's talking about, that we will always be here to fight and to maintain and to overcome the words. The words itself become to me the scalps. That we're not conquered, we're not extinct. And when anthropologists and historians continue to look at these things in a metaverse, you can continue to create the reality of still belonging and existing without having and bartering, because we can show the migration of the tribe all the way up into the canyons and all the way up to where we ended up growing up in Plainview, and talking about the stories that we went through as kids trying to grow up in a more settled colonial thought, and being like, you used to tell me, I remember you said, you can't cross 11th Street because you weren't allowed to go across 11th Street. Remember?
Yeah.
You told me that?
Yeah. It was,
Where was that at?
In Plainview.
In Plainview, Texas. But to go back to what you were saying about this metaverse, I think that what I understood it to be is there is an organization that has plotted out the entire world, and you go in. If a plot is not taken, you can buy it, and it's a virtual, right? A virtual place. It's not real. You're not buying the land, but you're buying this piece of data that you can do whatever you want with it once you have it. You can build a village of the old days. So to us, what Juan and I were talking about is that you have a different medium to tell stories. We can tell our story in the way that a book can't do it, and that was what was so interesting to me.
And at the same time, we still have to give a plug into Twitch. Every once in a while.
Oh yeah, every once in a while. If you guys are listening on other social media, there is a live feed on twitch.tv. Just look up War Dance Productions. This is Elder Speak, Elder Dialogue, ED.
And we're at that place where we have to be able to significantly continue to promote a more our marketing plan, and in a sense, those guys, let's say for instance, next decade continues to promote their importance of having, bringing jobs into the community, and of course the corrupt politicians backing them up, and all these other people that are totally lost to their culture, don't want to remember who their ancestors are, don't care anymore. They're the ones in power now. They destroy those concepts of history, and they don't want anybody to learn about them. And of course, we get back to the what is the critical racial theory, and where everybody just wants to hear the history of Texas from the Alamo on. And of course, now that we're starting to do a lot of research and uncovering some of the plans, we realize that we can probably even buy a virtual lot for that stuff. And tell the truth, why Santana, you never get Santana's side of it. You only hear the great white Texans, the Tennesseans from the Appalachia.
There's this narrative that tries to mimic, in the history of Texas, that tries to mimic the U.S. narrative of independence from England. And it starts, with what's his name, Father Hidalgo. What's Greek?
Hidalgo de Costilla.
Yeah. It starts with him because he was reading the of the time, the modern philosophers that were very much in, like Rousseau. He was reading Rousseau with the social contract theory. He was reading Locke.
John Locke.
John Locke, which is like 100 years before, the quote unquote founding fathers of the United States were reading that stuff, and they were coming up with their constitution. And it starts with Father Hidalgo, but it gets taken over by the narrative of Austin, because he has a very, very small part in all of that. But this goes from like, okay, we're gonna do whatever the Mexicans say because they're giving us land here, to the point that where he's like jailed, and he's completely. Anyways, they're trying to mirror that. They're trying to mirror that narrative of the U.S. That they were trying to break from tyranny. But what were they trying to express their freedoms of? It was just like, having slaves.
Exactly.
Like that was the one thing that was going to be seized from them.
So it was freedom for them, but not for people that they owned.
Right. And
how convenient.
Right.
And it still works like that in the economical world that we live in.
Yeah.
And that's where I was leading to about the purchase of land and how it's gone up. But at the time when they even started selling the land, those that they stole the land away from didn't understand the concept of money or that economy, and that society changed all that to the point where they just kept increasing the prices to control, the original people from getting it, and the people that deserve to get it, who would probably protect it better than the property owners do now. And because otherwise you wouldn't have these people selling 5 miles of land to build a wall, And the whole thing is that understanding the whole concept of eminent domain, when it doesn't exist with a country who sets up their own policies. And it was like, what's his name? Chris Rock was saying the other day, where he says,
he said a lot of stuff.
Well, the January 6th riots.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And what he says about the January 6th riots. And I think that was important for people to understand that they want to overthrow a government, and you're going to think, which government? Your government? That's it. What did he say? He says, I think the most we own is 2 record labels.
Yeah.
And
he's like, it's his whole thing that he's been saying for years. Is like, white people are like, we're losing the country. It's like, who's winning? Who's winning the country? Like I see that today a lot too, because I was watching a series of YouTube videos from Netflix. It's that Netflix is a joke. They have some really good comedians on there, but they were talking about the N-word specifically, and it was just like who can say it, and there's this whole section about like white people want to say it, right? They want to get back to this time where they could say it, but like now you can't say it anymore, and it's kind of that thing. It's like, what are you really losing? Like your freedoms to openly like say things.
Meta freedom.
Yeah, meta freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to the metaverse, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, I mean, what freedoms are you really losing? Like, you can't say the N word anymore without there being like backlash or direct consequences to it. You can't. And then even talking about Will Smith and the Chris Rock slap, like, comedy isn't safe anymore. I mean, it's just like, comedy is where it was, 20 years ago. It's just like people just feel emboldened to do whatever they want nowadays. And I mean, you got to deal with the consequences. Like, there are consequences for every action, but like I think people are willing to what's the word? Blur the line where a comedian is like, oh, what they want is man, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like there is a club of comedians, and they have like they have this idea of how the industry works, right? And you can't cross that line because that's the job that they do. You can't, let them say whatever they want. I think it was George Carlin who said, he's just like, don't censor him. Let him say what he wants. Just don't play him on the radio, or don't listen to him. Don't listen to the comedian. Like, don't try to censor them. Anyway.
But then there's that other side of freedom that opened it up to where he was able to say it. There was HBO.
Well, yeah,
and Showtime.
That's the other thing is like now, like he slapped Will Smith the right way, like, okay, the right way. Like, don't we call that stuff like when you don't they have a name for that? It's lateral violence. Isn't that the name for it now? Now we're condoning lateral violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a slap. I don't know. I'm not very knowledgeable of all the different new terms, but to me, a slap is a slap.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's the right or the wrong way.
You're gonna throw down.
Yeah, that's what it is, and
that's old time, old way.
I think that there.
You couldn't even use the MOF word, because that meant.
And now it's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The MOF.
Mofo.
Oh, okay.
The MF word.
Yeah, MF word. Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think that, so, we were talking about those people that were trying to get the name back. Remember, Juan, the Hidalgo name? And I was going to interject, but I decided that it could be maybe something that I shouldn't. But Hidalgo is not a name. It's a status. Hidalgo means hijo de algo. It came from Spain. So it's a status when you give someone importance in the government or in a community, is un hidalgo. So it's not I suppose that you could make it into a name, but it wasn't initially a name.
Well, it's given to a lot of people that didn't have, like us, we didn't have tribal last names. We didn't have last names, we just had tribal names.
Right.
But but you had to like be part of the family, and I think it was a way to control if there was any inbreeding going on.
So that was an application, a classification for nobles.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. For people that were not a viceroy or a duke, eran hidalgos. They were probably landowners, people owners perhaps, but eran hijo de algo, meaning I came from wealth. And that was the idea.
Yeah, vengo de algo.
See,
I come from.
And that's why, and that's crazy because most of the early contact from Europe to the Americas is from the lower part of the social classes.
Right.
The people that were sent over here, like even talking about Hidalgo y Costilla, like he was a priest, but like that name shows that he was of nobility. But even then, he's like at the lower part of that,
Yeah.
even that family,
Yeah.
because he's a priest.
Well, his beliefs and his thinking about his kind of freedom is more Indian than,
Yeah,
you know.
Very much.
We're talking about a difference in like the Texians that came.
right.
Their freedom was about their freedom to own people.
yeah,
His freedom, his idea was freedom to liberate
liberation.
people.
Yeah, liberation.
Yeah.
Liberation theology.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean that is a movement within the Catholic Church in itself. You know, which happens a lot with priests. Like even what's his name? Like he used to Pio used to bring him up all the time. Leonardo Bouf.
Both, yeah, both.
Was this priest who his whole deal was like the for him it was the American must step back for the refugee to stand on their own. And he was a refugee from Peru, lived in Refugio, right? Refugio, Texas. And he would help people, like in his specific case, because he was in a very, very bad car accident where he was like, in Peru, it's like either you have a doctor or you die. Like if you're in that kind of car accident that he was in, either you have a doctor, you have a surgeon, or you die. And an American surgeon was there and said, "Hey, he's my patient," and then brought him to the United States to work on him. And he stayed here ever since. But he's done that kind of work where he's helped refugees get amnesty
And he lived in Refugio, Texas.
in Refugio, Texas.
You know, interesting that name. When I was growing up, I was raised by my grandparents, Juan Mancias, my grandfather, and Faustina Mancias, my grandmother. And there were frequent jaunts from Plainview to the valley because that's where our people came from. So one of the traveling warnings that we had for each other was make somebody aware of where there could be trouble along the way. And Refugio was one.
One of them.
You never stop and sleep in Refugio. You got to make it through because if you had dark skin,
There's a hanging tree.
yeah.
And that's not too far from Papalote either.
There's a hanging tree in Refugio,
Just
Texas.
about every one of those places.
There's
That's a sundown town then.
yeah, there's a hanging tree. You know where Goliad, Texas is, right?
Yeah.
I own 5 acres there. There's a hanging tree in the middle of the city. And that's where but interestingly enough, they used to hang, I think I have it right. They had 2 hanging trees, one for white people and the other for Mexicans and Indians. So even there, it was like.
And it wasn't for white people because that's a thing that white people invented. It was for foreigners.
Yeah.
Because that was that whole
Or
native-
bandits or whoever
Right.
they hung.
Yeah, those Europeans,
Mhm.
those
And
Central Europeans,
And they made them Hidalgos.
Yeah.
We're going to hang you today because you're Hidalgo. You're using the white tree.
That's crazy.
But that's an interesting. There's so much hidden history in this part of the country, where
And all of that's being suppressed,
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it has to do so they can control the power. And the thing is that we're not making the laws, and our forefathers didn't write the Constitution. That's another thing. And when we talk about freedoms, whose freedom are we talking about? Theirs or ours? And so liberation theology becomes a big part of of our ordeals and the ways that we step into these struggles with, you know, the fossil fuel industry, who's making all the laws now, and people don't want to admit that, but that's what's happening when people like.
So they're the new colonizers in
Yeah.
there.
So what they're
The true invaders.
you know, like what the guy from ETP has done, and filed a
Who's
lawsuit.
ETP?
I'm sorry, Energy Transfer Partners, and what they've done to Beto O'Rourke, and wanted to file a libel suit against him because he said that he had bribed the governor of Texas, you know. But it was, I think, it was the word bribery that he said that was behind the whole thing about the libel suit. But he gave him $6 million for his campaign.
Who gave him?
Beto O'Rourke.
Kelsey Warren.
Gave
just said
Beto?
No,
Oh,
Sorry, I got that
Abbott.
wrong.
Abbott.
gave it to
Kelsey Warren.
Kelsey Warren. Gave it to
Abbott.
Abbott.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that he doesn't represent the people. I mean, to me, the only way that Texas will ever see the light of day is if the drawing of districts is redone. It's totally a one-way affair for the Republicans. That's how they control the state. And until we're able to redraw those districts in an equitable way, we're not going to be able to do much. So what does that mean? We elect the people at the lower, it's not so much the president or the Congress, it's these people in the state government and the county government that are going to, that's the root from where our liberty will grow. To a certain extent, our liberty grows from our voices also, what we need to say, regardless of what their laws are. And that's the point of contention, I think.
Yeah.
I just want to say we're on Twitch.
Yeah. If you're watching on his Facebook page and you haven't made the 5-minute journey to get on Twitch, please do that for us. You can download it on an app. You can watch it twitch.tv. It's War Dance Productions. I'm not really watching the feed on here. It looks like we have one consistent viewer. And I'm sure people are tuning in on Facebook. But if you can make that transition over to Twitch, we're trying to build the channel there. All of this will be cut, edited to your podcasting publications, so Spotify, Apple, all that at a later time, and it'll be on YouTube as well. But for the moment, the live feed is on Twitch, twitch.tv. Go War Dance Productions, and yeah, that's where you'll find us.
Brought to you by
the Carrizo Community Crew, the Tribe of Texas. But we want to shout out the name of the show again. It is Elder Dialogue.
We laugh at that.
Well, it's not really Elder Dialogue. It's Elders Speak. I'm sorry, but we were coming up with names because it was going to be like, it's going to be two old men talking. So we had to come up with abbreviation. So Elder Dialogue is ED, erectile dysfunction. Two old men talking. Just kidding.
And we don't want to have to prove that. So,
but I want to come back to what y'all were talking about, the hanging trees.
hold on. Let me just say one thing.
What?
We also want to thank the IEN for giving us the equipment to be able to do these things. And I just want to say that in behalf of the Carrizo Come Crew, the Tribe of Texas. I also want to give a shout out to Society of Native Nations, who is one of our good supporters in the sense of having our backs on things. So I just wanted to say that. So go to Twitch.
Make that transition over to Twitch, twitch.tv, and it is War Dance Productions. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe and follow and all that good stuff. So I really liked what you guys were talking about, the story. I'm probably going to clip that whole section about the hanging trees, because that's just blows my mind that when you look that stuff up on Google right now, what comes up is like TexasEscapes.com, historic trees of Texas. Historic trees of Texas are some of these hanging trees.
Yeah.
One in Goliad and one in Refugio, and then that's listed here. And a lot of these are hanging trees, these historic trees.
And you gotta ask, why would anyone name that city
Refugio.
Refugio? Refuge from what?
Yeah,
There's a story there, I'm sure.
yeah.
But,
We gotta look that up.
yeah.
And you know what's crazy about that is that the person that we met from there and his story was crazy. And how I was telling you about this guy named Pio Celestino. He has an Italian name, but he's Peruvian. And he looks very indigenous. Like he has the rounder face. Like he looks, very much like the Quechua speaking people there in Peru. And he showed up. Somebody had told him through, I guess, some channels, because he would translate Leonardo Buff's Portuguese writings into Spanish and into English.
Because he was in the Amazon.
Yeah, he was in the Amazon, and
yeah.
he was living with natives in the Amazon, and he was very much the next wave of this liberation theology that was happening in the Catholic Church, along with, like, I think that was something that the guy who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I can't remember his name. I can't say it. And I don't want to say it because Christopher Bazaldou will correct me and make fun of me for saying it wrong. So, yeah, I can't remember his name right now, and I'm not even going to try. But those specific writings are about,
Bushu.
What is the whole method that you work with? You want to make sure that NGOs are working with?
Oh, the Hemis principle.
The Hemis principle, to meet people where they're at,
Yeah.
basically. And that's very much what liberation theology, the pedagogy of the press is. It's kind of within that vein. It's more along the line. It's just and that's what my dad always quoted, pedagogy of press is like when the oppressed become the oppressor. Like we fill these roles, even as an outsider trying to do relief work or missionary work. There's a colonizer structure involved,
Of course.
and we have to be aware of that. Even if we're trying to help these populations, that are in need or that they're indigenous, they're set off, that there's a colonizer structure in place, and we have to be aware of it. That even though we're trying to liberate the oppressed, in some ways we through the structure itself, we might be continuing that oppression. But anyway,
And that happens a lot.
oh, that happens a lot.
With the NGOs that we have to deal with, because they like working or romanticizing the native presence and using it to whatever means they need. But all the big monies that come to them, and then they just trickle stuff out to those people out there.
That's where land acknowledgements, become what they are. They just become acknowledgements.
Well, I think I complain about that so much now that they just call it groundings. If they want to land acknowledge, give us our land back.
You want to acknowledge the people of the land, give them their land back.
There you go.
Before we close, because we've been going for a while right now, I know you haven't seen it, but I don't, and this is what's trending right now, and this is a good thing for you guys to talk about, because your parents were alive during this time, and there was civil wars all over the world during this time. Newly nationalized countries that had been under
probably
empire.
our grandparents. If you're talking about 1923.
I'm not talking about 1923, but have you seen the Banshees of Inisherin?
Yeah, I saw it the other day with you. It's kind of boring.
Well, you only saw sections of it, and I've been reading reviews about it. Apparently, like Martin McDonough, I thought he was Irish because all his films are like uber Irish, and he makes all these Irish films with Colin Farrell and that Gleason guy. I can't remember his first name, but it's an allegory for the Irish Civil War, where after fighting this war with England and they finally got their independence, the government that's like newly elected signs this agreement with the crown, basically saying that the crown in England can step in and have domain over their government at any time.
So what was the point of
What
the
was
war?
the point of the war,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so the IRA won't acknowledge it, right? And so they end up occupying one of their downtown areas there in, I guess it's Dublin, and they at the force of like the threat of force, they say that they will not acknowledge this government, not acknowledge that treaty, and so the new government has no choice but to fire on its own citizens. So there's like the civil war that happens,
Mm.
and the whole movie with Colin Farrell and I can't remember his name right now, but they're lifelong friends. That one day, Colin Farrell wakes up and he goes looking for his friend, and he's avoiding him. Like he goes to his house, he won't answer the door, and then he like is weirded out that he won't answer the door, and then he looks inside again, and he's climbed out the window just to avoid him. Yeah, and it gets to the point where he's just like, you didn't do anything, there's nothing wrong, but I don't like you anymore. I don't want to be friends with you, and doesn't give him any real reason or anything like that. And then Colin Farrell won't leave him alone to the point where he's like, look, if you bother me again, I have some shears at home and I'll cut my own fingers off if you keep bothering me. And Colin Farrell's like just so upset and like doesn't know what to do. So he starts lashing out angrily at him in public. And so the guy just starts coming over and throwing his severed fingers at his door. And it's an allegory for the Civil War, the Irish Civil War, because to them they were like, well, we just fought all this war for independence against the British, but now we're giving dominion back to the British.
Mm-hmm.
What was this all for? And so they start saying that well, you know what, we're not going to be a part of this government, and they basically with threat of force, they're basically cutting their own fingers off, like sacrificing their own people to fight this war in a way that could probably be discussed. It could have been discussed in a lot of ways. It was just, they were like, you know what? Well, we don't acknowledge your government. We're going to make our own government.
But the sacrifice is self-inflicted wounds, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
You fight a war to win, and then you inflict your own wounds again
Yeah.
for whatever you fought. And that is the comparison of the severing of the fingers. And I don't like you. I don't want to see you, but I want to hurt myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful. I watched it and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what just happened. Like when I watched the movie and I didn't know it was an allegory for the Irish Civil War. I remember watching it, I was like, man, this guy's like very needy. Like he needs this relationship so bad. But then when you put it to the backdrop of the Irish Civil War, it's just like, oh, this is the two kinds of people this is the two kinds of point of views that they had, and it still rings in who Irish people are today. Like it's defining of who they are. Mm-hmm. If their parents supported the IRA or if they supported the nationalized government, and the crazy thing is that the Catholic Church would not support the IRA.
You know, and we kind of see that in our society right now, not to that extent, but the point where our own people are against our own actions, the actions that are intended to bring freedom. Am I being recorded?
No, you're good. You're good. I think we lost the camera.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Go ahead and continue what you're saying because it's recording the audio.
You have people that sell their soul in spite of their. They no that
Well, let me see. Let me see if I can put it in perspective.
okay.
And when the first settlers came into the Northwest, I mean to the Northeast, Pontiac tried to bring the bands together, just like the Confederacy did, the Iroquois Confederacy, to try to survive, and they started picking out the weak link in there too, and pulled them out. And since we didn't have the defense mechanisms to defend our own lands, and then making us dependent on what they had, that made a big difference on how we lost
Conflict.
we lost the conflict, but we also lost the ability to reunite again because Pontiac tried it, Blackhawk tried it. Tecumseh was one of the biggest ones that really, I mean, tells a story of how he went from all the way from Ohio Valley to talking to the Kickapoos and all the way down talking to the Chickasaws to try and unite the Native nations against this movement that was coming west.